Joining me now is former Australian Ambassador to the United States, Arthur Sinodinos. Arthur, thanks so much for your time. First of all, can I just ask you about Russia and Ukraine? Sometimes what Donald Trump says is more of a projection, a hope, than what is actually happening behind the scenes. But he is getting things done. He's only been in power for 3 weeks. Do you think that he can end this war in Ukraine?
Well, his feet are now on the sticky paper. The conversations he's initiated with Putin and with Zelensky have made it clear that he's committed to some sort of peace process. The devil will be in the detail, Laura. What sort of security guarantees will Ukraine get coming out of this? What land do the Russians get to keep? Zelensky is pushing for a land swap because of an incursion he made into Russia. So there's quite a bit of detail to be worked out. And it's interesting that I think partly to appeal to domestic constituency, President Trump has sort of linked US military aid to exploiting some of the rare earths or other minerals in Ukraine. He's trying to make the point that this is not going to be a net cost, as it were, to the US. So he's playing both domestic politics and he's trying to find a way through to deliver on his commitment that he could solve this. At one stage, he said day one, but I think, like all these things, the complexity really hits you once you're in the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And he wants something out of it, which is very in line with how he's always been, both in a campaign and as president last time. Let's talk about the last time he was president, because we did get that trade exemption, but we've heard from Navarro that essentially they said Australia has decimated the aluminium market. Now, we've heard the trade minister,
if only we were that powerful.
Yeah, that's right. And Don Farrell said this morning that we knew, that the US knew exactly what we were doing and they embraced it because of all the reasons that have been stated. Is that your understanding too?
Look, there was an understanding on elements like aluminium that we would restrain the growth in volumes. And that was up to the companies. And it's also true that there was a surge in volumes, particularly around the time of the Russia-Ukraine war. So because this is a verbal agreement, it's all been sort of very flexible in how it's been interpreted and how it's been implemented. And there were some issues for how you get the companies to actually restrain their volumes without getting into competition policy issues. But the truth of it is that we are not the main target of this, but we are a target because of what we do sell into the US, particularly on the West Coast with steel. So we have had to cop it. I notice Australia is saying we're not going to retaliate tit for tat because of the costs of doing that. That's probably sensible in the short run. But in the long run, we've got to work out how do we live in a world where tariffs are likely to be going up, particularly on our major trading partners like China.
Yeah, these verbal agreements can be a bit hard because now you have a bit of revisionist history there and it's working in terms of the art of the deal and negotiating from Trump's perspective because he likes to have the upper hand. So just getting back to it, it was your understanding that, we were just filling that gap that was made.
Well, later on when the Russia-Ukraine war came along, yes. Because there was a wish not to be reliant by the Americans on Russian aluminium and whatever. So that's the point. The volumes have waxed and waned, and often at the behest of the Americans, as much as us trying to restrain our aluminium and steel companies.
You know how much personal relationships matter to Donald Trump. We had Joe Hockey there. He obviously got along really well with Scott Morrison. With Malcolm Turnbull, it was a little bit hairy from time to time. Anthony Albanese said he's going to throw our best people at this. Are all the best people ready to go? Do you think some, on your side of politics should be called in?
Look, this is an official negotiation. It's early in the life of the Trump administration. There are no relationships to get established between the PM and the president. At some stage, they've got to meet and have develop a rapport if possible. I don't like the idea of back channels to begin with because it's important for the ministers and the officials to establish relationships because they're the ones who are going to have to carry the relationship going forward and they're the decision makers. In this case in particular, it's the PM and the president who are the main players.
And really, in the end, whilst Joe Hockey did have a big, influence there because he'd reached out to the transition team very early in the piece, I think people forget that it did take us some 10 months and there were some 5 phone calls between Trump and Turnbull personally.
Well, this is the thing. It's always up to the ultimate decision makers to seal the deal. Ambassadors play their role, and that's important. But in situations like this, it's the president and the PM who can make a deal because they're the ultimate decision makers.